All right, welcome to the Week 10 preview of Biscuits and SEC. I am your host, Stephen Willis. Alongside the Hammer, we'll go over all the stuff that did happen and all the stuff that will happen. And this week, we can get into actual playoff rankings. How you doing, Hank?
Doing great, Stephen. Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Yes. One week ago, we had four games. You got Georgia that boat raced Florida. We're not really going to talk about that unless you want to talk about Dan Mullen's fall from the grace at all. Vanderbilt and Missouri turned out to be a decent little game, although Missouri's run defense giving up nearly 300 yards to Vandy. That's especially sad. Auburn defeated Ole Miss. Ole Miss now, I think they're down 6 or 7 starters on offense, including a Matt Corral at about 50%. But good win to Auburn. I'm not using that as a crutch or an excuse or anything like that. Just kind of talking about it was. But the game that was probably the game of the week was Mississippi State just absolutely taking it to Kentucky, winning 31-17.
Yeah, totally agree. You kind of hit on all of it. You know, the Auburn Ole Miss game was a great game, but you could tell that Ole Miss was pretty limited, especially at the wide receiver position. They just didn't have much out there. And once Auburn kind of put the clamps on the run game, there wasn't a whole lot that they could do offensively. But headed to Starkville, that was a great game. And, you know, I predicted them to win barely. I think I called it a coin flip, and it wasn't a coin flip. We saw Will Levis, you know, come out and just play a terrible game on the road, throwing 3 picks. They only scored 1 offensive touchdown. I believe Josh Ali returned a punt for their other touchdown, Kentucky that is. So Mississippi State's defense really just shut them down. And, you know, if you can stop Kentucky's run game, I think that's kind of what happens, because Will Levis is a decent passer off of play action when he's got a solid run game to work off of. But if you're not worried about Chris Rodriguez and you're going to make Levis beat you, I don't think he's there yet. And we saw that pretty clearly. And then, you know, offensively, Will Rogers, I mean, the guy is playing really well. He seems to be in sync in that air raid offense. And again, it's not vintage Texas Tech per se, Leach, where they're putting up 50 a game, but they possess the ball really well, which is surprising for a pass happy team. And in this game, you know, they actually ran it more than you would expect, and which I think helped. So maybe Leach will continue to use that strategy moving forward. But just a good win for Mississippi State to show that, I mean, really, they're just showing that the West is that much better than the East. I mean, people are thinking Kentucky might be the second best team in the East. They might finish second, and they just got whooped by what people were saying was the worst team in the West. So it's a gauntlet in the SEC West, that's for sure.
And also, I called the Will Levis, Kenny Trill stuff way back in from the very beginning. You as my witness on that one. I said I didn't know, I didn't believe it. I was never buying it, and their offense looked almost exactly like it did last year.
Yeah, exactly. You did call it. We can pull the tape. We'd have to go back. I don't remember what week that was, but you definitely called it.
Yeah. It was something else. We'll move on to this week's game after that, you know, quick turnaround. Mississippi State, by the way, made 17 in the playoff rankings. We'll talk about that whenever we get to the end of the show. But this week, we get more of a normal slate by SEC standards, and this is normally the week. We'll start out with number 2 Alabama are hosting LSU in a game that Alabama's favored by 28.5 points. Everybody expects Bama to cover this line, and man, how this rivalry has fallen from grace in 10 years. In 2011 was their famous 9-6 game, when it was just an absolute war of attrition, and they met in the national championship game just 10 years ago. And it's gotten to the point now where, I mean, everybody's like, Bama's probably going to beat them by 40.
Yeah, it is a little bit sad. You know, this is usually the game that SEC fans circle on their calendar as a heavyweight matchup, and just not the case this year. I do think Alabama will probably beat them by 40. You know, we didn't talk about LSU last week because they were on a bye, but Word out of Baton Rouge from Ed O is they didn't even have enough healthy players to practice. Um, and then I saw at another press conference he had this week, he was talking about basically all the things they'd done wrong, and he reeled off quite a bit of things that they had done pretty poorly this year. And all of it was true. I saw some people sort of bagging on him saying, "How can you say this?" Well, he's just calling it like it is. They've been really bad.
Yeah, what are they
Um,
going to do to him?
right, exactly. Yeah, that's a coach with nothing to lose and just calling it like it is. He doesn't have to play the game anymore. But yeah, I mean, this game it shouldn't be close. LSU, like we've talked about, they're depleted due to injury, depleted because their head coach is gone. They're kind of just a lame duck team, and being a lame duck team with not much to play for is not the situation you want to be in when you go to Bryant Denny to play the now ranked number 2 Crimson Tide, who do have things to play for and do have things to prove, and who don't like you at all. Especially after 2019, we know that Nick Saban and those Tide players have not forgotten that. So I think they're going to want to send off Edo, especially after those comments he made in a pretty embarrassing fashion. And I would not expect this game to be close at all. And I would pick Bama to cover.
Yeah, listening in the great game, Mel Tucker, right, for LSU is the leader, right? Has to be the leader in the clubhouse right now.
Got to be. Yeah. I mean, I would think so after that performance. And yeah, I mean, and well, I guess if people were serious about Franklin, he's lost a couple in a row. So we'll see. But I would think Bell Tucker is. I mean, that was a great game by Michigan State last weekend.
I think Franklin is destined for LA and not the Louisiana version of LA because it just fits his personality better. I don't think Franklin wants to come back to the SEC. He kind of rubbed people the wrong way when he's here. Granted, he got Vanderbilt to 9-win seasons back to back years, and we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. But I think LA and the Pac-12, and he just sees an avenue to constant success, kind of what he thought Penn State was going to be.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, personally, I have no idea who LSU is going to hire, but if they did hire Franklin, I think it would end poorly pretty quickly. I don't think his personality, his attitude would go over very well down there. Some of the comments he makes in press conferences, I think, would just be torn to shreds. So yeah, I don't think he's a great fit there. We'll see if he ends up at USC or ends up sticking it out at Penn State, but most likely USC, as you said.
Yeah, signing day in 2013, I was embedded with James Franklin at Vanderbilt on signing day and got to see everything that went on, exactly how he handled everything. You can see why the guy is successful. You can see why he's good at what he does, even if it's annoying to outside people. It's like if you're a rival of his, if you're an Ohio State fan, what he's doing at Penn State is it's very annoying. But for Penn
Yeah,
State, it's probably working. It's all recruiting based.
right.
I don't know how we got off on the tangent about James Franklin, but whatever.
We'll
Let's
take it.
take some walkover games real quick. Florida and South Carolina, both teams 4-4, both teams alarmingly different. I'm expecting Florida to kind of roll in this game.
They need to roll. I mean, look, Dan Mullen has had a bad week. Speaking of coaches putting their foot in their mouth in press conferences, he seems to do that on a pretty regular basis. He's done it again this week, making the comments about recruiting, especially on the heels of what Kirby said about recruiting just a day before. So Florida needs this win. They need to win convincingly. South Carolina is not good. We just saw what A&M did to them 2 weeks ago. So if you're Dan Mullen, you look at that game and say, this is what we've got to do, or better, because we think we're Florida. We're still in the upper echelon of the SEC. Well, you got to go out and prove it. So I think they will. South Carolina is just not good, and Florida, I don't really know what to think of them. They just seem to be very inconsistent. But they're a much better football team than South Carolina is. And whether it's Anthony Richardson or Emory Jones or who cares at this point, they should be able to run the ball on South Carolina, and they should be able to stop South Carolina's offense, which just doesn't have anything. So I think Florida will win by 3 touchdowns at a minimum in this one.
Florida's a sneaky, difficult job. Other than Spurrier and Urban Meyer, every other coach there has not succeeded. So they found that secret sauce, and Spurrier did it by doing what nobody else was doing, which was chunking the ball around the yard. And then Meyer did it by running the RPOs and the spread offense before everybody else. So it was more about finding a coach that's doing things a little bit differently. But even you go back to Galen Hall and those guys before them, uh, there's just not a history. I think Spurrier was the first coach to win an SEC title down there.
Yeah, I believe you're right. It's one of those things
Mm.
where you look at it and you would think, geographically speaking, they've got talent all over the state of Florida. They're the only school in the SEC. So on paper, yeah, it looks like a great job, but you nailed it. I mean, they've had two coaches that have won there, and they won big,
Mm.
but everybody else is flamed out for one reason or another. So we'll see what Mullins' fate, what happens to him. But I don't know right now. He'll be fine, I think, this year. But he's on some shaky ground for sure.
Yeah, it goes to prove my theory that there are no blue bloods. Now the media is going to say that Florida is a blue blood. Florida's that not that spectacular of job, and everything that goes on. If you don't get the right coach in there, you can fail. You can fail anywhere if you don't get the right coach into the game. And like Mike Dubose and Mike Shula would like to have a word at Alabama. You know, everybody remembers Saban running through his streak, but man, they struggled to start with. Now
Yeah, they did.
let's change over to Arkansas and Mississippi State, 17th ranked Mississippi State against the Arkansas Razorbacks in Fayetteville. Now Fayetteville has been a house of horrors for Ole Miss. I think State has fared fairly well up there, but Fayetteville's a difficult place to play, and it's definitely harder the later in the day you get them. This game is the 3 o'clock game, the one that's the other side of Auburn and A&M. So it's in the normal friends and family spot. But this could actually be a good game, and if Auburn and A&M get out of hand one way or another, it might be worth checking out.
Yeah, I think this will be an intriguing game. I think it should be pretty close. Arkansas obviously started the season really hot and then has cooled down as of late, coming off a bye week. Um, and be playing at home or not a bye week. Or maybe they played Pine Bluff. Who knows? But anyway, this was their first bigger game since they lost to Auburn. But I like the way Mississippi State's playing right now, and with Catalon out for Arkansas, I think that really hurts their defense, especially with a pass happy team coming in. We saw what Mississippi State did in a night game at Kyle Field. They did not seem phased at all by a hostile environment. They were able to run their offense no problem. So I think they'll do it. I mean, we just saw them beat Kentucky by stopping the run. Well, Arkansas likes to run the ball. So if they can stop Arkansas's run game, then I like their chances. And I think Mississippi State has decent corners as well. So while Traylon Burks is a very good weapon, and I don't think they're going to, stop him per se. I don't think they're going to let him beat him either. So I like Mississippi State to go in there and win a close one. Maybe 31-28, 31-27, something like that. But I like what State has going right now.
Yeah, one thing to keep in mind about that A&M game. For some reason, Mike Elko decided to play Mike Leach's offense with a little man coverage and play it straight up. And every one of those plays, like I say every week, is a man beater. It's designed to beat man. That's how Wes Welker got to the pros. Danny Amendola running that position in a Mike Leach offense. I don't think A&M will do that again. But Arkansas is going to drop back with that drop 8. They're going to keep everything in front of us. That's where they introduced it. And you'll get to see if Will Rogers can put together another game like that Kentucky game. Because if he can do that, he's on the road to being special in this conference. But that drop 8, this will be the first time Will Rogers has seen it because last year was KJ Costello. It can be a little bit of a different animal.
Yeah, it'll be a big test for sure. Like you said, Odom knows what he's doing. But I just like where Will Rogers is right now, and we'll see what he can do. Like you said, should be a big test and a close game. Arkansas, they're not going to lay down. I think we've seen that. Sam Pittman has that team playing hard. So if you're going to win, you're going to have to earn it.
Yeah, and both of these teams are competing for bowl eligibility. I mean, they're probably going to get there because State has Tennessee State, and Arkansas is bound to get another win along the way. Although I think they have Alabama next. Maybe they have Missouri at the end of the season, and if they don't run for 600 yards against Missouri, something's wrong.
Yeah, they've got Mizzou and LSU left, as you would think you could pencil in some wins there for
Okay,
them.
that sounds like Texas Bowl for the Arkansas Razorbacks, but good season for them.
Yep.
Missouri and Georgia in the what this should honestly be the friends and family game. 11 o'clock on ESPN. I mean, Missouri's giving up 290 yards rushing a game. Vandy ran for 3 bills on them last week. They're just going to hand the ball off to their stable of running backs. I'll be surprised if Stetson Bennett throws 5 passes in this game.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, we don't need to spend much time on this. I think
Mm,
Georgia beat Vanderbilt. What was it, 62-0?
mm.
It'll probably be very close to that. Maybe Missouri can scratch out a touchdown or a field goal here or there, but Georgia's going to be able to do whatever they want. I mean, Zamir White could play quarterback, and they would win by 50. So
Yeah,
this game is going to be over quick.
yeah. Liberty Flames come into Oxford to face the 16th ranked Rebels in Vaught Hemingway on the SEC Network. It's a game to where actually, if you listen to the other show we have on the channel, Talking Ball, we actually floated the idea of resting all 3 of the starting wide receivers and resting Matt Corral this week. We would let the backups handle everything. You should be able to good enough to run the ball on Liberty and get the win. Your defense is playing well. I would do that. Get ready for A&M.
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad plan. I mean, especially what's his name, Altmaier, I believe, is the backup, correct? And
Yes.
he came in and looked pretty good against
Yeah,
Auburn. And granted,
he
you
settled that
know,
game down as a true freshman. First significant playing
yeah,
time.
yeah. I mean, he wasn't in for a ton of time, but hey, coming in a hostile environment like that on the road, he looked fine. So if you want to put him in at home in a place he's much more comfortable at against Liberty, I don't think I wouldn't have a problem with that. Especially knowing, how beat up Corral has looked. And like you said, I think this is a game that Ole Miss should be able to dominate in the trenches and just win with physicality. Malik Willis is a good player and Liberty's no pushover, but they're also not a team that should be able to come on the road and really give Ole Miss many issues. I think Ole Miss will cruise in this one, and although not a bye week, like you said, they can kind of treat it as one in terms of rest. Even if they want to even if they want to play those guys, get them a few series and then sit them down, just because they've got some obviously big games coming up to close the year with A&M, and then the Egg Bowl will be tough. So they're going to need to be healthy in the home stretch. And I know their bye week was way earlier before Bama, so you
Yeah.
got to take the rest when you can get it.
Yeah, absolutely the case. And they probably won't do it because Lane and Matt Corral have a crazy kind of symbiotic relationship. And Matt Corral is a guy that's super competitive and wants to play. So he'll get out there on crutches if he could and throw the football around just because that's the kind of guy he is. But yeah, it is what it is. Now we get into the games that I think will be the 2 games of the weekend. Number one, Tennessee goes up to the big grocery bag at Kroger Field and Kentucky. Uh, Kentucky's a 1 point favorite. It's on ESPN2. It's a night game. After Will Rogers had all of that success, Hendon Hooker has to be licking his chops, right? He should be pretty healthy at this point.
Yeah, you would think so. I really don't know what to think of this one because I was just kind of talking some trash on Kentucky. However, they've been a much better team at home, right? They obviously got the Florida win at home. They took care of Missouri, and then when they've been on the road, they struggled with a South Carolina team, and then obviously last week against Mississippi State. So I think they will play much better. They'll be ready. There's still a ton in front of them, right? If you're Kentucky and you still have a potential to win 10 games, that's massive. So I think they'll play well. But I just think Tennessee with Hendon Hooker, if he's healthy, I think they're kind of just a better team right now. Kentucky should be able to run the ball much better than they were against Mississippi State. But I just like the way this Tennessee offense is moving the ball. And I think they'll be able to run it. I think if Hendon Hooker's healthy, he'll be able to throw it and they'll pull out a tough one. They just, I don't know, they seem to be, battling hard. I mean, that game against Alabama was a really good game and they're coming off of that tough loss, obviously, and then the tough loss to Ole Miss. So they're hungry. They're ready to win a close game and not just play a close game only to fall short at the end. So I think I think they'll go up there and pull it out. I just think they've got a little bit more juice on offense right now and confidence, and Kentucky's kind of reeling.
Yeah, and one thing to keep an eye on: Tennessee's defense is a master of creating explosive plays for the defense, lost yardage, turnovers, things like that. If they can get Kentucky behind the chains and you start seeing second and tens pop up, there's a good chance that defense can do some work against Will Levis and the boys.
Absolutely. And as we know, Levis is prone to mistakes. So,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, if you can hold them on first down, put them into tough situations, he'll help you out.
All right, number 13, Auburn goes into Kyle Field to take on Texas A&M. A&M's a 4.5 point favorite. It's the CBS game at 2:30 Central on TV. It's a game to where Auburn goes in and out with what they do. They play some semblance of 90s style football. When teams adjust to that, they really don't have a plan B. So you have a situation like where in the second half they scored 3 points. A&M, very good defensive team. They play very well in the line of scrimmage. And honestly, I think that 4.5 points might be a little low. And I think Auburn's just getting a little bit of credit for where they're sitting at rankings wise. But as far as offense against A&M's defense, it's going to be very difficult for Auburn to score. And I think that A&M is going to be able to overpower a little bit Auburn's defense. And this might be a 2 or 3 touchdown game.
Man, I hope so.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, as an A&M fan, but I think you're right in a lot of what you just said. I mean, again, Auburn is a very good team, and we've seen them win tough games. And then obviously they lost a tough one at Penn State, and got whooped by Georgia like everybody. But um, as you alluded to, they only scored 3 points in the second half against Ole Miss. Once Ole Miss was able to figure out their run game and stop Tank, they just don't have a lot of weapons on the outside, mainly because their whole receiver room left after last year. So they just don't have a ton of guys out there. And, Bo Nix is playing very well. He's not turning the ball over, but he's also not throwing for 400 yards a game, right? He's efficient. He's making smart plays, but they're not beating anybody over the top. And against A&M, I think that's kind of where you need to attack them, especially with some of the injuries they've had at corner. A&M has a true freshman starting at one of their corner spots. So if you're going to beat them, it's probably best to do it on the outside rather than try to go with that defensive line in front seven. So I do like A&M in this matchup. The key here, as with any game, but especially in this one, is going to be the trenches, because if Auburn is able to run the ball and they can do what they did to Ole Miss, then we'll probably see a very similar score where Auburn scores, 28, 31, 35. And I'm still not convinced A&M's offense can score much more than that. I think if they can hold Auburn, to 28, it'll be a close game, but I would much rather see Auburn around, 20, 21, 24 to make me feel comfortable, because A&M's in the same boat, right? If they can't run the ball, their offense is not going to do very much. I think they should be able to run the ball pretty well against Auburn. However, Ole Miss, very physical, good run game, struggled to run it on Auburn last week. So it'll be very interesting to see. I think there'll be a lot of, it'll be a pretty good chess match between Elko, and what he does to sort of game plan against Bo Nix and hopefully limit his running ability, and then what does Derek Mason do to try and stop A&M, and how are they going to treat that run game and sort of make Calzada beat them. But in the end, I do think being at home, A&M's a little bit more talented in my opinion. They're playing very well, so I think they'll pull it out. maybe by a touchdown or even less. I think this will be a close game, just because Auburn fights. They don't give in. So be a close game, very good, but I do think A&M will pull it out in the end.
Yeah, it should be interesting. Worth noting that Derek Mason made his bones by shutting down Oregon back in the day. When nobody else could stop him, somehow he had the secret sauce. He did the same thing to Ole Miss last weekend. A&M, a different type of offense, though. They're more like what they used to see in practice at Stanford. So, worth talking about. Okay, playoff rankings came out Tuesday. What are your impressions? What do you make of them?
Well, I didn't have a ton of takeaways really. Two main ones, I guess. So first of all, I try not to get too wrapped up in this, especially the first one, because a lot of the stuff is going to work itself out with teams playing each other. Um, but I will say I was surprised to see Alabama at number two, just because they obviously have a loss. So you're putting them ahead of several undefeated teams, which I wasn't sure the committee would do. Personally, I don't have a problem with that. I think if you're being honest, Alabama is probably the second best team in the country, right? Who would be favored against Alabama on a neutral field other than Georgia? No
Yeah,
one.
nobody.
Yeah. So while I don't disagree with them being ranked there, I thought it was surprising that the committee did that. Um, but if you're behind Alabama and you're upset about that, again, it'll work itself out. They've got to play out. If they lose another game, they're done. I mean, no two-loss team has made it yet. I don't see that happening this year. So it really doesn't matter that Alabama is up there. Um, the other one that surprised me, though, was Oklahoma being at eighth.
Mm-hmm.
Um, again, they're undefeated. You and I have watched their games. I don't think they're that good. They played a lot of very bad teams very closely and lucked their way into some wins. But I thought the committee again would just value that zero in the loss column a lot more, and they, got put behind Michigan, Ohio State, Oregon, and Alabama, all with losses. So that surprised me a little bit. Um, but that was kind of it. I expected Cincinnati to get left out of the top four. Uh, I don't really have a lot of faith that they're going to get in, nor do I really think they should. But we know what this is, right? These are all Power Five ads sitting in a room. They're not going to put Cincinnati in there. It's just not going to happen. So unless there's total chaos, they're going to look for any excuse to put another team in ahead of Cincinnati. So I wasn't surprised to see them at six.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on it?
My thoughts is I'm okay with one, two, three, and four. Cincinnati being at six just tells me that they're not going to let them in. It doesn't matter what they do, which means that the group of five is probably going to jump on the train to expand the college football playoff. So everybody worried about that, and I think that's going to take care of itself. Michigan, I think, is a little bit too high. Oklahoma might be too low. I think Oklahoma should be about six, honestly. Notre Dame shouldn't be anywhere near the top 10. Um, Ole Miss and State side by side at 16 and 17. That's going to make for a fun egg bowl.
Yep.
And then there's Iowa at 22. And it's like, man, you remember when they were second in the country like 2 weeks ago? Is just crazy. And North Carolina State makes an appearance in there. Was Mississippi State beat them as well? So three teams on this playoff ranking list, Mississippi State beat.
Yeah, it's like you said, the committee clearly values the wins. And as long as NC State keeps winning, they're going to look better and better. And I don't know. I can't keep up with the ACC because I know Pitt obviously lost this past weekend, so I really don't know who's even in the hunt for the ACC championship other than Wake Forest. But again, if NC State keeps winning and gets a shot in the ACC championship, then Mississippi State's just going to look better and better because they whooped them at home. It was a 14-point win.
And I would say Michigan State should probably enjoy the position they're in currently. They have Ohio State left on their schedule. This is the time of year when the Big Ten just really starts to chew each other up. Michigan has Penn State. Michigan State has Penn State. They're going to get one of those. Is the craziest thing. And then you're going to look up there, and there's going to be one Big Ten team left. It's going to be Ohio State, and you're going to figure out like, how did that happen? But I
Right.
will say this: if Ohio State were to drop a game against Michigan at the end, like all the damage is done and Michigan's out, and they just drop that game, Ohio State's out. It's that may be the path for Cincinnati to get in.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Like I said, there's not been a two-loss team make it before, and I don't think the committee will do that. So yeah, if you're Cincinnati, you just need to hope that the Big Ten eats itself alive, that Alabama loses another game so that they're out, and really they better hope either Oregon or OU drops a game as well. Now they might put a one-loss OU team in ahead of Cincinnati with a Big 12 championship. I don't know, but all those teams in front and even hovering behind Cincinnati, uh, you better hope that they lose because the committee clearly does not want to put Cincinnati in.
Yeah, yeah. And group of five teams, expand the playoff. Quit trying to jockey over what's going on. Quit trying to do whatever you need to do and expand the playoff. The ball's always been in your court. There's more of you than there are Power Five teams. So you join in with the SEC, you guys have the advantage. The Big 12 is going to vote for it as well. The Pac 12 is probably going to vote for it as well, seeing they've been there twice in 10 years or something like that.
Yeah,
So,
they better vote for it.
yeah, it is what it is, man. Hank, thank you very much for stopping by today and talking a little ball. Hope you have a great weekend and good luck to your team down at Kyle Field this weekend.
Thank you, sir. We will do our best and try not to read too many Hugh Freeze news clippings with him returning to town.
Yeah, I think it's very important that Ole Miss massages this situation carefully.
Yeah, yeah, that's one way to put it,
Yeah.
isn't it?
So, all right, we'll catch you next week, man. Have a
All
good
right,
one.
sounds
All
good,
right.
Stephen. Thank you.